Thank you for joining me, Tom. It's
Thank
nice
you.
nice to have you. Before we get started on more interesting topics, I guess, or some of the topics that brought us together, I read your article. But before then, I want to talk about your career and your education and your background in music.
Sure. Well, it's nice to be on your podcast. Thank you for inviting me on. And yeah, well, I'm a guitar player primarily. That's what I'm trained in. I basically began playing in my early teens. I started playing a lot of blues guitar and fingerstyle guitar, and I always really loved music, and I had a very emotional connection with music very early on,
Hmm.
and that kind of sparked everything off for me. And I started performing quite early. I was about 13 when I started performing. And then as I got gradually more into my teens, I started to want to really kind of know more about music, and I felt like I wanted to do it properly, and I
Hmm.
wanted to kind of learn everything I could about music. So I started studying classical guitar, and originally I started just teaching myself and
Hmm.
teaching myself to read, and then eventually went on to have lessons with various people, and I did my undergraduate at Trinity College of Music in London. Now it's called Trinity Laban, so it's
Hmm.
affiliated with a dance college. And studied with some great people there. And then subsequently, I got a scholarship to go to Canada. And I was in Vancouver, which I know is
Yeah.
close to you,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I know
yeah.
Seattle well. And I did my masters there, and had a great time there. And now I'm back in London, based here as a guitar player, and I also do some orchestrating and arranging and things like that.
And you're staying busy. I looked at your schedule. It seemed quite busy.
Well, it's I'm always trying to keep busy, as we all are,
Yeah.
but it's never an easy ride when you're a professional musician. But yeah, always trying to keep the calendar full.
And I saw that you're, as you said, also you're improviser. You like to improvise. I read that a little bit in your bio.
Yeah,
How did
yeah,
that
yeah,
come about? Was that
definitely.
encouraged by someone, or you just felt that you should improvise?
Well, that's how I started playing. I started playing by improvising and just fiddling around on the guitar and making things sound that I liked, and that's always stayed with me. And it's always a big part of what I do. Even in my classical playing, I try and do as much kind of not necessarily improvising notes because I'm learning the notes of the piece,
Hmm.
but improvising musically and trying to just inject the kind of spontaneous musicality into
Yeah,
things all the time.
yeah. And competitions. It's another thing I read in your bio, which I've always had mixed feelings about. And I'm sure many people would want to hear some thoughts from a person who's competed and competed successfully. How's the process for you for competitions? Any tips for people who are afraid to compete or have mixed feelings about them?
Well, I would say don't be afraid because I I haven't done many competitions. I've only done one classical guitar competition, which was the Northwest Festival in your neck of the woods, which is all the Northwest
Oh, that's
states.
right. Okay.
And I won that competition. So I was very fortunate to win that competition, and I think basically when it comes down to competitions, you just have to have a good day, and you have to be feeling right, and you have to just enjoy the moment. And I had a good day, but I would say to anyone who's thinking about doing competitions and is unsure about it, just go for it because you
Yeah.
never know, you may end up winning.
And one more thing before we get to, as I said, the article, playing in Queen Elizabeth Hall, playing at the Olympic Games, these big events, how is the process to maybe the connections that you've made that led you to those events, or just how's the process in general to play such big events?
Well, I mean, it's the biggest events are always the fun events. They're not always the most financially rewarding ones, but they're the ones that I enjoy the most. And I wish I got more of them, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
But I've done a few things like that which have been great and I've really enjoyed. But also I play a ton of small gigs. I play in jazz clubs and places like that,
Yeah.
and I equally enjoy that. I just love performing music, and I think it's important if you're a professional musician or aspiring professional musician just to play as much as possible wherever you can,
Yeah.
whenever you can, and not be too picky about things like this.
Well, now to the meat of the subject and the reason why I contacted you in the first place, the article that you wrote. What prompted you to write the article? And it was very well written, so I'll let you talk a little bit about your feelings about the article. The article that was published in the Guardian, and then your response to it.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying it was well written. I enjoy writing a lot, and it's something I want to do more of. And I have a little blog for the Huffington Post over in Canada, which I just do from time to time, just for fun. And I think I'd like to do more of it because I seem to have got a good response so far. When I first read that Guardian article by Charlotte Gill, I thought it was really funny. Actually, I just thought it was kind of funny because she seemed to be very opinionated and not have a lot of real experience in what she was talking about. And I think it's mainly a fault with the editors at the Guardian for even publishing it in the first place. And I mean, the backlash that you saw from the music community, I think that's not unexpected, but also I do worry a little bit that we're spending too much time talking about it because it was such a silly article in the first place and seemed a bit ridiculous to me.
Yeah, and you called it hilariously ignorant and profoundly insulting. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to. Not that she's reading what I'm writing or anything, but I don't mean to make her feel bad by saying that. All I'm trying to put across is the point that a lot of people read the Guardian. A lot more people are going to read the Guardian than are going to read my humble blog.
Yeah.
So it's you kind of worry that people like that are getting the sort of space in that sort of newspaper, and I think that's why I just wanted to add my voice to the huge list of people who already have.
So, music education, you've studied in Canada and the Pacific Northwest, and you've studied in the UK, and you've done many master classes. I'm sure you've learned from other people. What can we do in music education that is lacking in the university setting, in the college setting, or even in just early on in our young careers? What's lacking that we're not getting to? You've had the great experience of doing it on your own, learning how to improvise on your own, studying the instrument on your own. But some people like me, I went to music school right away and just had the music school experience without having the ability to do all of these other things that you've had the experience of doing. What can we do in the classroom settings, in the private lesson settings, as music educators to make a better environment for the future generations?
Sure. Yeah, it's an interesting point because I think, especially when I went to music college, it took me a few years to settle into the kind of more academic music college vibe because I felt like I was a bit of an outsider because I came from a whole different kind of world of music, and it's not like I had classical lessons from a young age and was brought up with that. But actually, I think that the most important thing is to have really inspiring teachers and to inspire young kids who are learning instruments just to get into the classical music and, as we said, Western notation and all of this stuff, because it is amazing. And I wish I'd had a really inspiring teacher from a younger age. I had to kind of come at it from a backdoor entrance. And I feel that if I had have had some teachers in school who were maybe more passionate about the music that I've subsequently discovered through doing, my classical studies, then I would have been way more into it from a younger age and maybe wouldn't have had to struggle so hard learning difficult pieces when I was auditioning for music college and stuff. So I think inspiration and passion is the main thing. When you're learning at, kind of early teens, child level, that's the main thing. You just got to get inspired.
Her article, and it's not to go back to the article so many times, but there were some things that, even though a lot of it I agree with most musicians, there were some things that were sort of true to me, at least, because sometimes I feel like growing up wanting to be a conductor, I wanted to go on to all these master classes, and sometimes I would look at the fees for some of these master classes and they were ridiculous, so I didn't have the funding to go to some of these things. What can we do when we're on to the next level in our careers and we're organizing these master classes? What can we do to make it more accessible for people who don't have the funds? Is there something we could do? I know it's tough out there, and I know as musicians we need to get paid. We have to pay for these festivals or master classes that we organize, but what can we do? Is there something we could do to make it more accessible for people who don't have the funds to pay, $1,000 to attend this or that master class?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's the same for me. And you only have to look at my student debt and overdraft to see how much I've spent on music education. I think the number one thing is for local governments to fund these schemes that are out there for free music lessons for kids and stuff. In London, just where I am in East London, there's a scheme in the borough of Newham, which sends music teachers and people like me into music schools for free music lessons. They call it Every Child a Musician.
Wow.
And there's things like that out there, especially in London. London's pretty good for that, especially in the poorer areas. And I think there are some things in the States as well, and in Canada, I know. And I think basically things like that need to be funded through governments. That's the only way, because we still need to get paid as teachers, performers, and it's not like we're going to be able to just do it for free because it's our livelihood.
Of course.
But still, we are we're giving a service, and it should be funded through the government, I think.
You're also a composer.
Not so much recently. I mean, I did used to compose more. I've done a lot more kind of arranging and orchestrating for different things in recent years, but composing something I'd like to get back to, definitely. Yeah. It's more about finding the time and inspiration when it comes to composing, because it seems like a bit of a luxury.
Yeah. And it's always hard to find time. There's so many things going on. But I was going to ask you about, since you're in the UK, how's the amateur, or as we in the States we call it, community music making? How's that in the States, in the UK? Is there a big community for amateur musicians?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, I'm no expert on it, but there's tons of amateur orchestras out there and choirs and things. And yeah, that was a bit of a funny bit in her article when she was talking about how she couldn't join all these choirs because she couldn't read music. I mean, my mum has joined quite a few choirs, and she's not a fluent sight reader. I mean, I think she had piano lessons as a kid, but she doesn't read music. And I don't think that would stop you from joining a community choir or anything like that. Most definitely.
So how, going back to your career, how are different genres important? How is it important to play all these different genres? And, I've heard when I've talked to other people about this, they've said that, sometimes when you go too much into improvising, then you lose some of your skills as a true classical musician. Or sometimes when you're playing too much classical music, you lose your true ideas about how to improvise because you're so rigid. So how have you managed to do both? And what do you recommend to people who want to do both but have always been told these different ideas from all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, my belief is that it's a very strange kind of modern phenomenon, this idea that we either learn music classically and learn it note for note and perfectly and, don't interact with the audience in any way, or we're the other way and we're totally free and, and we just improvise. And actually, I think, all of the great classical composers throughout history were great improvisers. I think that's pretty well established historically, and I think we should all be improvising, and we should all be learning pieces note for note. I mean, I know many wonderful jazz musicians who have never learned a piece of music note for note all the way through. Yeah. And I know many wonderful classical musicians who can't improvise over, Happy Birthday.
I know.
Yeah. So it's a balance, I think, and I think most of the musicians that I love and respect are the ones who are versatile in both of those things.
So you're a music educator, you improvise, you play classical music, you arrange, you compose, you do all these different things. For me, looking at you, it's the true version of an artist of the 21st century. Another how-to question: how do you manage to do all these different things? Because composing, taking time to compose is different from going out there and trying to teach, going out playing gigs at certain jazz bars, or even playing bigger or venue gigs. How do you manage all these things? How does the mind go from one thing to the other?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's very kind of you to suggest that I'm a well-rounded musician. I like to think I am. That's what I aspire to be anyway. I think it's I don't really think of it as different things, to be honest with you. I can play a gig with a soul singer and I'm just playing off charts or something, and soloing and things like that. And then I'll go home and practice some 19th century classical piece. And it doesn't feel too different for me. The main thing I think that's different is technique, and I think the technique changes for when I switch to classical. But actually, musically, I think as long as I know what I'm trying to make the music sound like, and I normally have a pretty good idea in my mind, then I don't think it's too tricky to go between the two.
Yeah.
And, as you say, if you're a conductor, you're going to be dealing with different music from different eras all the time. And I'm sure it's very similar for most musicians. They probably just don't maybe think about it. I think a lot of orchestral players I know have never even considered improvising ever. And then, if they're presented with that challenge, they find it tricky. But actually, maybe if more orchestral players were told to take 20 minutes of their practice every day and just fiddle around and come up with something nice and not even think about it, just play, just play. I think it would be very useful.
Yeah. It's so hard though, because you're brought up in the system that's been so consistently telling you to do things a certain way. You're gonna warm up, you have to do your scales and warm up this way, you do some etudes, you do this and that, and there's a certain way of doing things. Again, back to the thing, and I maybe you could get in a little bit more in depth about this, but what can we change in the university level, at the university level, because you've been to colleges? What can we change? If you were the dean of a school of music at a college, how would you change the curriculum, if anything?
Well, it's fun actually. My different experiences in my undergraduate and my masters. When I was at Trinity, actually, it was a lot more. Kind of bizarrely, it was a lot more forward-thinking in many ways, because I could take jazz lessons on the side, and they had some different festivals where you could kind of start your own projects, and they would give you the time and the space to do that. And then doing a master's in North America, it was a bit more focused on theory and kind of classical training, which is maybe the opposite of what most people think. That North America, I found, was more conservative in many ways. Yeah. I don't know what you think about that. Do you think that's the case mostly? I mean, I think maybe because Europe, it's like, we've had it for such a long time, and now we're looking for something else.
It looks that way, although I must say I'm not very fortunate in that way, because most of my education has been in the U.S. I was born in Armenia, but my parents moved to Los Angeles when I was 11 or 12, and so I grew up here, and most of my studies have been here. So I'm not fortunate that way. Although I've had some European teachers, so I've had that experience. But for the most part, I don't have the luxury of comparing them.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because there's so many wonderful technical virtuosos I found when I was in Canada, and also spending time in the US. Yeah. Maybe even more so than the UK, to be honest with you. But there wasn't the same focus on, being more creative with different things. I didn't find, personally, anyway.
Let's go to your career. The performances that you're doing now, which is very full, as I saw on your website. What's the primary repertoire you play, and what are you doing with those performances exactly? Just a little bit more about the performances.
Yeah, well, when I do a lot of these kind of solo guitar shows, I kind of mix it up between some classical pieces, and then I'll play some jazz pieces, and then some more fingerstyle pieces. I'll even just arrange some music that people will like, and it's kind of more of a all-encompassing guitar show as opposed to a classical recital or something like that. And I feel like when you're a guitarist, you can kind of get away with that more, because the guitar is such a versatile instrument. And I like doing things like that, because you tend to get a really appreciative audience, and people do like the guitar, and they like to see someone who knows how to play the guitar, because a lot of people play the guitar but not very well. Of course. And so it's I would like to do more kind of formal classical recitals, but that opportunity doesn't come along very much, actually, especially when you're a guitar player. I used to work at the Wigmore Hall in London just as an usher, and I remember one day someone came up to me and said, I saw you coming in today with something on your back. Was that a cello? And I said no, it's a guitar. And he said, I can't stand the guitar. But maybe a little bit representative of that particular venue. But when you're a classical guitarist, it's quite hard to get recitals. But I do play classical recitals, and I also play with various singers and ensembles and things. I'm going to be doing a concert of guitar quintets later this year.
Okay.
So music for guitar and string quartet, which I'm really looking forward to. And yeah, chamber music I love playing as well.
I feel bad saying it, but I didn't know there were guitar. I'm sure there's all kinds of variation on instruments, but I just didn't know there was a guitar quintet genre, I guess you call it.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, there's quite a few 20th century pieces, obviously, but it's also Boccherini wrote quite a few works for guitar and string quartet.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's a nice ensemble. It's sometimes the guitar can get a little bit drowned out in the background, but yeah.
Who else in the guitar playing world does what you're doing with the different genres? Are there people who do this often? I know guitar players tend to play things from all different genres, but particularly what you're trying to do, are there people out there who do the same?
Yes, I think definitely, yeah. I mean, just one name that springs to mind, Ralph Towner, who is he's a jazz guitar player, but he plays with a classical technique and obviously classically trained, and he's the one I can think of who really kind of fuses all that stuff together. And there's other people like that, Martin Taylor as well, who does that. And yeah, there's quite a few players like that.
Yeah.
Also composers like Gismonti, who is a guitar player, but also fuses world music and jazz. And yeah, I mean that's why I love the guitar, because it is so versatile.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's as I say, I think we can get away with that when we're in the guitar world. I think if you're a violinist, it's a little harder to do things like that. But yeah.
Well, I was gonna ask, the point of this podcast first is to just raise questions that I've always wondered about, and to talk to people who are way more advanced in their fields than I am. And one thing that always is fascinating to me, the electric guitar and acoustic guitar, and if people go back and forth between them, if you go back and forth between them, the differences, the ways that you use those different instruments. Because I've actually seen people who've used electric guitar as a solo kind of an instrument, although acoustic guitar is more of what I've seen solo. But so what are the differences? Do you play both?
Yeah, well, I mean, I will play electric guitar sometimes. I've played with some various bands who asked me to play electric guitar, and I've done some pit playing in musicals and things like that where you end up playing electric guitar. And I like playing electric. It's fun. It's kind of easier to get around the fretboard because the neck is a lot thinner.
Yeah.
Obviously the body is smaller as well, so it's a little easier to play. It's always a bit tricky if you're switching from acoustic to electric guitar, because it feels like the acoustic feels massive after you've been playing electric guitar for a bit. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I would say I definitely prefer playing my classical guitar. Mm-hmm. So I prefer the nylon strings. I think that's what I'm used to, probably through just hours and hours of practicing classical guitar. But yeah, I mean, I kind of happy to play whatever the job calls for, really. And yeah, so kind of switch classical, electric, steel string guitar.
I always forget how time passes so quickly when I'm doing these interviews, and I come up with a set of questions for the people I interview. But one of the last things I want to ask is your advice to future generations of young musicians, or even musicians that are older or are making music. What advice would you give them to make it a better world for both the younger generations as music educators and for the audiences as performers?
Yeah, I mean, my advice would be to just throw yourself into it, do as much as you possibly can. Don't quit. I mean, that was the thing about that article that really got to me, because it was kind of saying like, oh, it's so hard reading music, let's just not bother. It's like, no, you just keep doing it and you get better and better and better. You know, like 10 years ago, I couldn't read music. Now I'm fluent, you know. Yeah. You just got to do it more and more and more. So I would say just throw yourself into it, do as much as possible, play as much different music as possible, listen to as many different genres of music as possible. Even if you're a classical, conductor like you are, listen to heavy metal, listen to jazz, listen to everything, because it's all important. Yeah.
Lastly, and I said the last thing was going to be last, but lastly, I'm always fascinated with what people do outside of music. What do you do outside of music? Do you have time for things outside of music?
Yeah, yeah. It's music is such a big part of my life that I'm kind of always thinking about music. But I mean, I enjoy reading. I enjoy working out. I enjoy all the things people do. I enjoy drinking beer. Uh, yeah, but it's music's always whatever I'm doing. Music's always in the background
Yeah.
somewhere. So sometimes if I've been working on a piece for too long, I actually end up dreaming about fingerings and things. And it gets so into my brain that it's just always there.
Yeah. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining me. I'll post your website up on our links and go from there. If you ever want to chat again about whatever you want to chat about, you're always welcome to join me. And this podcast is new, so it's gonna keep going.
Sure.
And I'm just happy that people like you are interested in talking about the variety of subjects, because, as I said before, this started because I wanted to ask questions that I didn't know answers to, and I just wanted to be more personal. So it's working out, and thank you for answering my questions.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you. It's nice to talk with you. I hope it's not raining in Seattle. I know it rains
Today
mostly.
it's not raining, it looks like, so I'm
That's good.
excited. It has been a rainy season this year, so
Yeah.
hopefully the summer will be warm.
Hopefully.
Well, if you're ever in town, let me know, and I would love to sit down with you and talk some more music and everything else.
That sounds great. It was lovely to speak to you.